good to be back. And so today we're going to talk about something that is truly important. It's how our brain digests and processes painful life experiences, otherwise known as traumatic events. So what we have focused on in the previous weeks is understanding how incredible God's love is for you. That God is love. Whoever lives in love lives in God, and God in them. And when there is love, there is no fear, there is no anxiety, there is no pain, right? His love is perfect. It's the only thing that can fill us and cover us and bring the divine healing that we need each and every single day, especially if we're recovering from a painful or traumatic experience. So a high-level overview of what we learned is God is love, and in order to have love, we have to have relationship. And in order to have relationship, God blessed us with free will. That is the ability to make decisions. He is never going to take free will away, no matter how bad or how good we are. Because free will is a precursor to relationship. And that is what he wants. A relationship that is solely grounded in pure and perfect love. I have mentioned time and time before that the brain is neurobiologically wired to love and to be loved. So many of us as Christians have come up to me and asked me, hey, Doc, I have faith. Why am I not just healed? Why didn't it just happen instantaneously? I said, well, everything in life is a process. And if we don't let that process work, we can't see how God is moving on our behalf. And then they asked me, well, what's next for me? How do I get my life back on track? Well, the process is truly easy, and it's holding your thoughts captive to Christ in every single thing that you do. So let's talk about trauma. Now I'm going to give you my humble perspective as to how I perceive Jesus viewing trauma. When you think of the most traumatic event in all of history, I imagine truly that it would be the death of our Lord and Savior on the cross. Can you imagine being Mother Mary, watching her son pass? The disciple Mary Magdalene, the pain, the suffering, the agony, feeling so helpless to seeing the one you love so much experience the most suffering anyone could possibly experience. So what did Jesus do to reconcile that? Well, I believe that as Jesus is fully man and fully God at the same time, he was loyal to both. So as a man, he came back. He came back to show Mary Magdalene, to show the disciples. He says, look at me. I'm whole. What did they need? They needed a corrective, emotional experience to see how God was working. They needed to see him whole. Do you think that if Jesus didn't come back, that they would have closure in their brain? Probably not. Let's think about Peter. He was the disciple that rejected Jesus 3 times, denied him. They were the best of friends. Jesus has a corrective emotional experience with Peter when he says, Peter, do you love me? Peter says, of course I do. He calls out again, Peter, do you love me? Peter, do you love me? He does it 3 times to reconcile the 3 times that Peter denied him. Peter saw Jesus whole. He saw the scars. And they had a corrective emotional experience because Jesus told them, I love you. No matter what you do, I got you covered and my love is enough. So what I'm getting at here is Peter could have chose to be just a fisherman. That's what we do as human beings. We go back to the old neural networks in our lifetime that just don't work. The maladaptive ones, the ones that keep us stuck. When we want to give up, we just go to the old behaviors and the old habits that are not productive for us. I'm not saying that being a fisherman wasn't productive in parallel to what he was doing with his walk with Jesus. There's a discrepancy there, wouldn't you say? And so instead, he chooses, and God calls him to be a fisher of men, to spread the gospel of truth. Now I'm going to ask you a very honest question. Do you believe that Peter would have continued to pursue the gospel? Or do you think he would have been stuck a fisherman if he didn't see Jesus whole? I believe firmly that everyone would have been stuck if we didn't see him. We need to understand that he is the one who conquers hell, death, and the grave. That he who is in me is greater than he who's in the world. And if he overcame and he was resurrected, that power lives in me to change the neural networks in my brain that are rewired on stuck on trauma, to see that we can have freedom if we believe in him. So I'm going to get vulnerable with you for a minute. Let's talk a little bit first about vulnerability. If you've heard about Brené Brown, she's a fantastic therapist. And she talks about the importance of being vulnerable because she believes vulnerability is the birthplace to joy and happiness. But nobody wants to be vulnerable because we don't know what to expect. We don't know if there's rejection on the other end. We're scared. We don't want to be rejected. We think that if you only saw who I am, could you love me? Could you even respect me? God's love covers that. And what are you doing in your small groups? You're being vulnerable. Because each one of you is not only coming out with that vulnerability, but you're being a vessel of God's love and grace to show that the person who's being vulnerable in the moment is covered. Covered. How important is that? So I'm going to share a story about when I was a young doctor, a young psychologist. I think I was about 26. I was super hooah when I joined the Air Force. All right, I was a young officer. I was determined to be a general. I totally drank the Kool-Aid. It was ridiculous. Ask my mom. All right, and so I had this responsibility. I had several taskings, and one of them was to be the traumatic stress response team lead. And in that, I was designated to do what I had to do if anything went wrong during an air show. Okay, so we were having one of the largest air shows in Northern California. And it was my job to go to command and control if anything goes down and to coordinate services as needed to make sure everyone in the audience was safe and to include the pilots. So there was this individual, a pilot. He was doing a very interesting maneuver wherein he takes his biplane literally about 10 feet off the ground. He flips it upside down, and on the wing there is a razor. And that razor cuts a ribbon. So it's a ribbon cutting ceremony, essentially. And you're like, okay, like, guy's 10 feet off the ground. But this was in California, Northern California. You think where all the fires are. Why do we have fires? Because of all the winds. And so it was very, very, very windy that day, and the winds were terrible, and everybody kept telling him, no, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it. But he insisted, there is free will. What happened? His plane ended up crashing, and it landed on his canopy, and he couldn't get out. And I was there. I saw things, I heard things that nobody ever wants to hear. And in the midst of that, I thought, how is this my fault? I've started to blame myself. You may think, like, why is this young woman blaming herself? I was blaming myself because I felt as the team lead, the traumatic stress response team lead, that I should have known better. The reality is that the fire department was too far away from his wreck that they couldn't get there in time. They didn't anticipate that happening. We usually don't. And so there was a tragic outcome. And I thought to myself, well, if I'm responsible for everything, if I just did 110%, maybe he would still be alive. And so as my job as stress traumatic response team lead, I had to have individuals come in and do therapy with me. Not with me, but I did therapy with them after the event that they saw. But then I realized that I had symptoms of acute stress disorder, which is the precursor to post-traumatic stress disorder. And you know what Satan kept telling me is, no one believes you're a real doctor. You're too young. You're suffering PTSD. If you were a real doctor, you think you'd have PTSD? Really? You want to go to your commander? You just got your doctorate degree a year ago. You want to go to your commander and then get a med board out of the military because you can't handle it? You suck, is what Satan said. He says, you're a fraud. And I sat there and I listened to it for some weeks. I let the symptoms arise, and I noticed that they were wrong, and I noticed I needed to get help, and I didn't want to say anything because I still wanted to be a general. But I thought, how am I going to be a general? So then I got vulnerable, and I started talking to my commander, a fantastic woman, got me into treatment for EMDR, and it was just a few sessions, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. Little did I know that I would never learn about EMDR ever, because it's not one of the evidence-based practices that the Air Force tends to use. Had I not learned about the benefits and the effects of it, I would have not have created rhythm restoration, which is also using bilateral stimulation as a catalyst. So there's, in a way, how God brings beauty for ashes during a really difficult time. But let me talk to you a little bit about the enemy, and I'm going to show you here, there's a difference between true and twisted guilt. I'm sure every single one of you has experienced true guilt, obviously. And then there's twisted guilt, and twisted guilt is sheerly of Satan. All right, let's get true guilt. In life, what do we have control over? It's only internal. It's your thoughts, your emotions, and your behaviors. You have control over zero after that. So when you do something ridiculous and mean and selfish because you chose to do that with your own free will, and then you feel bad about it, that's normal. That's guilt. The good news is, guilt is an emotion that helps set us back on track, not to repeat the same old toxic behavior over and over again. And God has you covered. When you ask for forgiveness, it's granted, and you have to believe it. You have to believe that when God gives you forgiveness, it is yours. You can't continue to hold yourself hostage to guilt. The second part of that equation, which was what I was experiencing, and many of you in this audience have experienced that, is actually called twisted guilt. It's a term I coined because it's a manipulated, manufactured guilt that is only brought to you exclusively by Satan. And with that being said, it's when Satan tells you you have control over everything around you. And if something goes wrong, it's your fault. A lot of my service members going into combat, if one of their battles dies, they blame themselves because they thought it was my choice to take that path, and that's where the IED was. But that's illogical. You didn't have a crystal ball to predict the future, because I guarantee you, if you had a crystal ball to predict the future, you wouldn't have gone that path. And if I had a crystal ball to predict the future that day, I certainly would have ensured that the fire department was already there. That plane wouldn't have gone up the second time, third time, fourth time, right? And so with that being said, when we hold ourselves to twisted guilt, that's the enemy taking its claws in us and holding us captive. So let's choose to be free. The reality with external events is that we only have influence over them. A high degree or a low degree. In my circumstances, my influence was very low. So I have to give myself grace as God gives me grace. Because I deserve to be free and I deserve to move on. Do you think that if I continue to berate myself and see myself as an imposter or as a fraud, that I'd be standing here preaching to you today? No. I'm not going to let the enemy take my thoughts captive to him. My thoughts belong captive to Christ. Amen. So how does the brain process traumatic experiences? Well, it's just like the gut. It has to digest it, okay? The hallmark trait of post-traumatic stress disorder is avoidance. You don't want to deal with it. Who wants to deal with it? I think of avoidance as a snowball. When you have a traumatic event, it's like the size of a snowball. The first thing you've got to do and ought to do is take that snowball and throw it against the wall so that it shatters. But what happens is that you don't want to deal with it, right? You don't want to deal with the trauma. Who wants to deal with the trauma? Who wants to bring that to the forefront of their memory? We're just trying to push it under the rug. So when you keep pushing that snowball over and over and over, soon it becomes the base of a snowman, and then that base of the snowman becomes an avalanche in your life if you don't deal with it. And then what makes matters worse is that if you had previous trauma that you hadn't dealt with, the whole trauma constellation starts to light up, and you feel really bad. It does not feel good. Then you get those traits of hypervigilance, feeling on edge, feeling keyed up inside, waiting for the next shoe to fall because you don't know when it's going to, because you're not trusting in God. Okay? So what do we have to do? We have to confront it. We have to make peace with it. And you know, I talked about this earlier, and I'm going to revisit it one more time. God does provide divine healing in certain circumstances. Don't get me wrong. But a lot of the time, he allows us to work through it and holds our hand every step of the way, because when we learn how to go through it with him by our side, we trust him more. And guess what? Then we have a testimony to get other people to trust him more, so he multiplies it. Amen. Amen. And so with all that being said, let's get super geeky for a second. What we do when we have trauma, it is stored in the limbic center of your brain. The fear center, more specifically known as the amygdala. So what we have to do is take the memory from the amygdala and bring it to the frontal lobe. It is the part of your brain that makes you human. Unlike any other animal in the world, even unlike a chimpanzee, we have problem solving in the front of our brain. And then what do we have to do? We have to look at the trauma from multiple perspectives. We have to force ourselves to get unstuck from our pain and our suffering, because when all we see is our pain and our suffering, we're wearing blinders, and we can't see how God is working on our behalf. So get unstuck. Take off the blinders so you can see how he's working, how he's going before you, how he's got your back in everything that you do. Because if all you see and all I see is I am at fault for this aircraft mishap, and all I can see is a burning body, all I can see, I am not seeing how God worked and moved, not only in the life of the person that was lost, being at the right hand of God, eternally made whole and healed, but how God was working in my life and the lives of so many other people at the same time. How he was bringing divine comfort. How he was teaching great lessons all at the same time. He doesn't need a bad thing to make a good thing, but he will turn all things for the favor of those who love him and are called according to his purpose. So when you see the blessings in your life, in the midst of the hard time, blessings came for me in the form of promotion. People reaching out to me, new relationships being restored, financial blessing, having a baby in the midst of it. All these blessings that I wasn't able to see if all I could see was my pain. Remove the pain blinders and see how God is on your side, working on your behalf. Amen. And when we do that, and when we see that, he changes our DNA all the way down to the basic substrates, the protein of the memory. It transforms. The maladaptive networks start disconnecting. Chains are being broken until you have a healthy memory that knows that Jesus has got your back and he's always on your side and he's always going to go before you, because there's no anxiety for tomorrow, because you see how he was working and you understand that you're not immune to the pain and suffering of the world, because Jesus wasn't either, but he took on the cross so that you could have the life of freedom. Amen. And so, with all that being said, let's change the neural networks in our brain. Let's rewire the DNA, because we heard about transgenerational trauma a few lessons back. You can pass that on to your offspring. let's not trigger that gene in epigenetics. So when we are able to see how God is moving, anything is possible. And I'm going to challenge you today when we do the next 4 minutes for rhythm restoration, okay? Now, rhythm restoration uses bilateral stimulation and rhythm to help regulate the autonomic nervous system as well as to emotionally process and digest experiences. We also use visualization to lay down healthy and adaptive neural networks. And today we're going to kind of do a mixture of both. We're going to go back to the past, and we're also going to see how God was working by using our imagination, understanding and letting the Holy Spirit come and work through us. In Isaiah, it states that God will turn beauty for ashes. Think of that phoenix rising up from the pain, that he will bring the oil of joy for mourning, that he will comfort you in this moment, and that you have the garment of praise for the spirit of heaviness. So when you feel you need to be free and you feel you need to connect to the true vine, you sing your praise and your worship and your prayer. Okay? So today, Paul, where is he? He's not here. Will you do me a huge favor and show us bilateral stimulation? I appreciate it, Adolfo. This is bilateral stimulation. If you haven't been there before, alternating back and forth, boom, boom, at your own rhythm. It doesn't have to be as fast as him. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. He's going to fly away. There you go. I'm like a bird. I'm going to fly away. But needless to say, we're going to do some of that bilateral stimulation. Okay. I got myself all connected to my bracelets. So let's look at what I have in store for rhythm restoration. We're going to do 2 things, 2 visualizations, okay? You're going to leave all your hurt, your pain, and your suffering, all the ugly things people have done to you, that traumatic event that you feel stuck on. You're going to take it off like a backpack, and you're going to lay it down at the foot of the cross. You're going to drop it and feel all that weight dissipate. So whenever you're ready, I want you to close your eyes. I'm going to give you the next 30 seconds just to visualize taking that hurt and that pain and that suffering, those thoughts of self-doubt, and dropping it at the cross. Or even handing it to Jesus, because his yoke is easy. You're ready, take a deep breath in, let it go, and feel that weight disappear. It's not meant for you to carry. The next visualization while you do your bilateral stimulation, your butterfly tapping, is this. There's a painful event in each one of your lives. I'm not asking you necessarily to go there right now, but I'm asking you to see and allow Holy Spirit to direct you to where he was in the midst of it, so that you can see the blessings operating on your behalf. I want you to take off those blinders. So whenever you're ready, get into your tapping pose, close your eyes, and fall into your own unique rhythm. And I want you to visualize how God was still working on your behalf. I want you to visualize your unexpected blessings. I want you to see the phoenix rising from the ashes, and the story and the testimony you have to share. Take a deep breath in, let it go. I want you to practice this. It's going to be so important. Next week, Pastor Jimmy is going to do something called inventory, where we have to go to the hard places. And I want you to realize going to the hard places is something we have to do in order to have peace. God says, look, I am doing a new thing. I'm making ways in the wilderness and streams in the wasteland. But in order to do that, you have to have peace with your past. So let's bring that together. Thank you.